Off we go. Hello and welcome to the PR Week, PR Week's regular weekly roundup of everything that matters in the worlds of PR and communications. My name's Steve Barrett. I'm the Editor-in-Chief of PR Week. Going to guide you gently through the next 25, maybe 30 minutes as we pick up on the big issues of the week, and a lot of big topics around to talk about, and a fantastic guest. We've got Bill Chandler, who's CCO of Western Union. Bill, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Steve. It's fantastic to be here and to talk with everybody.
Yeah, it's great to have you on the East Coast, and we've long followed your career at Schwab and Gap and now at Western Union, so looking forward to finding out about that. And we've got Frank Washkuch here, as our news editor. How you doing, Frank?
I'm well. How are you?
I'm good. You had a busy week?
No, always, yeah.
Yeah, lots of big stories around this week.
Got some good stuff for our readers on the website.
Yes, so check it out, prweek.com. So after we've interviewed Bill, we'll talk about the Equifax security breach. Some sad news this week. Two friends of PR Week passed away, unfortunately. Edie Windsor, who was a former Communicator of the Year, and Marv Gelman at Ketchen, so we'll reflect on their careers. Sir Martin Sorrell has finally joined Twitter. He announced that at DeMexco this week with Jack from Twitter. So we'll talk about that exciting fact and WPP's progress. Hope Hicks has been installed as Communications Director at the White House on a full-time basis. So we'll talk about that. And when Sean Spicer was on Jimmy Kimmel last night. And we launched our PR Week Hall of Fame for 2017. So we'll talk about the honorees for this year. A really great group of PR legends in there. So let's get into it, Bill. CCO at Western Union. Western Union, fascinating company, really, and very global, obviously, 200 countries. Tell us about the comms function there, and first of all, how long have you been doing that?
I've been in this role for about a year, and it's a truly global company, global operation, and which means at any moment of the day, the issues change. So it's dynamic, but it's a company that touches so many lives around the world. We do operate in 200 countries. We're the company that how money moves around the world, both for individuals and businesses, strong purpose, and as I hope all your listeners know, a company with a rich history, right? So the company has been formed for 166 years ago, has an incredible legacy, and a bright future. So there's a lot going on within the company. I'm thrilled to talk about it, but a truly global operation, and that gives us opportunities and, of course, challenges for a communications team.
Sure, yeah. I mean, how do you modernize a brand, like tell a modern story, but still tap into that heritage, which is a great brand value as well? How does that work in terms of communications?
Well, first and foremost, there needs to be a great team on the ground and a great team with our agency as well working with us. So I'm proud to have a team that spans the globe and can really follow the sun. So a team based in Dubai, London, Miami, Denver, and San Francisco. And there's so much opportunity to tell the story and link to the past, but absolutely our focus is about focusing on the future. And the company, the CEO is Hikmet Ersek, a fascinating visionary leader who has a great background, born in Turkey, led a huge business for Western Union in Austria, has now been CEO for 7 years. So he's quite unique as a CEO in terms of bringing humanitarian focus, a focus on refugees and migrants, but also placed some really early bets on the digital business. And so you walk into our office in San Francisco, where I spend some of my time, and it feels like you're walking into a startup. So it's really a company that has that legacy where we can talk about any issue, we can talk about the economy, we can talk about the impact on people, we can talk about the future, like where the movement of money is going, but very strong purpose. And so if anything, there's probably too many opportunities on the horizon, and how do you then pick those few that really you want to break through on? But it's exciting to be part of a company that really touches so many people. Mm-hmm. And so part of what we've done in the last year is getting the roles and team in place, making sure the hiring a new global agency, first global agency for us a year ago, and then that's Fleischman Hillard. So we went through a very sort of deliberate selection process, as you always do. And I think there's great agencies all around. I've worked with Edelman and Brunswick and have a lot of respect for a lot of the agencies. Fleischman Hillard stepped forward, and great proposal, great team. And I think what we've seen is some really creative ways we've been able to partner together, and then some, when you're in the trenches dealing with an issue that might come up, they're there for you. So I think it's a great partnership, but we're getting the team in place and really making sure with any communications function, how do you balance the reactive, of course, what comes our way. Obviously, the proactive is where you can really define a company, elevate our profile, and make sure that more people are aware of who Western Union is today, not that we just have been around for a long time.
Yeah, so you mentioned very global, and you mentioned purpose and focus on migrants and issues like that. Clearly big issues these days, and with the political situation, not just in the US, but all around the world, those are issues that everyone's talking about. How do you navigate that? And companies are big debates about how far they should step up and make statements about social issues and get involved, or how much they should just concentrate on doing business. What's your attitude to that, and how do you navigate that as a communicator?
Well, and I think in all the roles over the years that I've been fortunate to play, it's about staying true to the values of the company, or when I work for an elected official, staying true to the values of the elected official. And so what's right for the company, and what also finds the right balance, right? I have a bit of a government relations background, so at Western Union I work very closely with the government relations team, the investor relations team, of course, and the marketing team, which I'm happy to talk about as well. But it really has to be the partnership of, okay, the values of the company, how do you reinforce that, and when do you speak up, and when do you reinforce, and when perhaps are you not the company to step into the fray. So for instance, with DACA a few weeks ago, our CEO made some statements on Twitter in terms of protecting DACA and finding a solution, spoke to our employees at an all-hands meeting, and had an email that went out as well. So for us, that was an issue that certainly from an internal perspective, you stay very close to employees, but also when you use the bully pulpit. And Western Union has 10 million Facebook followers. We have a huge audience, and so there are issues that we speak out on. My view, sitting as CCO, there's probably also issues that, okay, is that really an issue that speaks to your values, and do you need to be part of the debate, or how do you support in other ways?
Why was that issue a good fit for you? I mean, why did you and your CEO decide to really step forward on DACA?
Well, I think when you look at the issue of law-abiding people who are here contributing, you hear the stories of they're in the Army, they're police officers, there's public servants, and to have that group penalized seems just wrong-headed, and just felt from a heart perspective, from an emotional perspective, not the right thing to do for people. And the fact that we have customers on a daily basis in 200 countries, and we see we serve people without regard for socioeconomic level, right? So we serve everybody. Mm-hmm. I think that brings a level of compassion, where that was an issue that felt, and especially from a CEO perspective, he's a leader in the area of advocating for migrants and refugees, serving that community, and making sure that he speaks up on their behalf. Now, certainly we weren't the only company to speak out on behalf of it. We weren't the first company, right? But it was something where we felt it was important to add our voice, and it was a team came together, made a recommendation, and ultimately the CEO makes the call, which is how it should work.
For sure, no, it's a big issue. Talking about moving money around, does Bitcoin and blockchain impact your business? We had Jamie Dimon coming out this week from JP Morgan saying that it's all a con or a fraud.
Wow.
Obviously, he's got his reasons for saying that.
Point of view.
Yeah, but what does that impact your business in terms of, or is it just something you keep an eye on in terms of, this is the future of?
Well, we certainly keep an eye on it. And I mentioned our digital office in San Francisco. And we have a terrific CTO, Chief Technology Officer, David Thompson, who's an expert, and perhaps he could be a guest and go into the type of detail that's really needed on the issue. I think when we look at currency, when people use Western Union, they're moving money from one currency to another, right? So that's cross-border. They have to have their currency issues and FX issues that they have to navigate, and they want to do it in a simple way. So in a way, we're currency agnostic. Right. So if the currencies change over time, we can adjust to that.
So
I think
you
that's,
could be moving bitcoins around.
Yeah, I'll let our CTO really speak to it, but it's something we stay close to, something we're following. We're certainly on an innovation front. We have partnerships with Facebook, and people can transfer money through our Facebook Messenger. So and we are very forward looking on Bitcoin or whatever the currency shifts are. We have the systems around the world that can adapt to that. Yeah. And we have the compliance programs and the regulatory agreements that allow us to operate in 200 countries that are rather complex to get, right? And you work years to get them. And so we have an infrastructure, both technology and compliance, that is impossible to rival, right? So it's something where, when we look at that, we're like, okay, let's talk about it, right?
Yeah,
we lean into the conversation.
Yeah. Finally, you spent a long time at Gap, leading
11
comms
years.
there, yeah. And that's obviously an industry, the sort of mainstream retail industry, if you like, that's going through incredible changes, and retailers such as Gap. Amazon seems to be trying to take over the world, and some would say it's achieving that. What's your reflections on the sort of world of retail, if you like, and the future for mainstream retailers in a tough environment, but with exciting developments in retail?
Well, first on Gap and the similarities with Gap and Western Union, both are such purpose-driven companies, right? At Western Union, 80% of our employees give to our foundation each year. The Gap Foundation just celebrating its 40th anniversary, I saw on Facebook. And so what Gap has is just such a strong foundation in its founders, Don and Doris Fisher, and such passion among its employees that my view of retail is that there will be winners and losers, right? But name brands like Gap and Old Navy are certainly very strong brands, right? So I won't get into the Amazon competition. I'm not in that space anymore. There's a lot I probably don't know about what's happening. I think companies that are innovative and go online and really, just like at Western Union, we're focused on the customer. What does the customer want? That's why 9% of our business today is done through digital and in the digital apps. And so I think for Gap, for those who are winners and losers, I think will the retail industry shrink potentially? That could happen, or more of those specialized operations that so many former Gap people are leading in some capacity going to be huge opportunities. I think they will, but I just had a great 11 years at Gap and have such passion for that company, and a lot of great people still work there.
Yeah. Okay, thanks, Bill. We'll talk to you more in the podcast. Frank, let's get into some topical subjects. Talk about Equifax. Seems to be one of the biggest stories of the week.
Right. So
a security and communications story.
Exactly. Major data breach at Equifax in late July. They did some investigating, and they just announced a data breach last week. It could affect as many as 143 million Americans. Which makes it one of the biggest data breaches in history. So we confirmed this week that Edelman is working with them on the communications response to it. Now there are some critics. One of them is Brian Krebs, who's a very well-respected IT security and cybersecurity blogger, who would say that the website that was set up in response to this actually made the situation worse. So there are some critics of Edelman's work in the response to the data breach so far.
Was Edelman responsible for that website?
Yeah, so they're, the passwords and the usernames and part of the code and all that are listed as Edelman. So highly suspected as being
right.
so. So the FTC is starting to look into this data breach. There's more to come on that. There's a number of class action lawsuits filed. So really more at the beginning stages of the crisis than the end at this point.
And Equifax was criticised a little bit because they were charging people when you went in to try and pause your account,
right.
or sort of to put a stop to it so that you wouldn't get your information compromised,
right.
in theory. They were actually charging people for that, and they got some blowback on that.
Right,
too.
and rightfully so. I mean, it's the sort of thing that when a company has a crisis, you would think they would try to make their customers' lives easier as quickly as they could.
Not try and
yeah.
make money out of it. Yeah. Okay. Bill, I guess the wider issue there is this whole security issue that any company, you're moving money around the world, and Gap was a retail, as a communications professional, security incidents are going to happen, aren't they, at some point? So can you prepare for them, and what can you do to make sure you're ready, when a crisis may strike?
Well, I think for any communications team, large or small company, thinking about, okay, what crises could happen, are we prepared, how do you move quickly, is certainly something we all discuss, debate. I think in the last week or so it's perhaps been even discussed a bit more. And I think it's just such a place that communicators can add value within the company. And I'm not going to go into past crises because that would take some time and take us off subject perhaps. But in past crises, the more we're prepared and the more we all move with speed, and again, anticipate that customer reaction, the more successful we're going to be. I think it's hard out when you're outside the group that's planning it. You don't know exactly what happened and why. But I think communicators investing the time in crisis planning with their management teams is so important. And I think companies understand that. I think, the topics that could come at us at any given day are so wide-ranging that it's being nimble in times of crisis.
Do you think CEOs and the C-suite are much more aware now that they have to have a plan in place, and they know the CCO needs to be at their right hand, if you like, to make sure they're prepared in those situations?
Oh, I think it's something that every CEO talks about with not only their CCO but others at the management level, and has an expectation of how the company will respond, and it's something that we all take very seriously. But I don't know that it's greater in the last week. I mean, certainly it's been quite topical. I think it's something that has been very front and center for a period of time now.
Okay, thanks, Bill. Some sad news this week with the passing of Edie Windsor, who was a former Communicator of the Year for PR Weeks, and a great campaigner for marriage equality and equal rights. And Marv Gelman at Ketchum, who also passed away. Frank, any reflections on those two individuals?
Yeah, Edie Windsor was PR Week's Communicator of the Year in the 2014 PR Week Awards. Really a historic figure in that she was part of a lawsuit that eventually led to the Supreme Court striking down the Defense of Marriage Act. A really fascinating person, according to the guest op-ed that Kathy Renner wrote for us this week. And
Kathy, a former guest on the podcast, and runs an agency called Target Q.
Right, and just talked about Edie's personality and the mentorship role she played for a lot of people, and her death. It resulted in responses from people even like former President Barack Obama to a lot of other bold-faced names. So really important figure in the past couple of years.
Sure, absolutely. And Marv Gelman, much loved member of the Ketchum
He really
team.
was. Everybody at Ketchum knew Marv. I knew Marv for years, and it's really sad to hear about that he died on Monday after a 5-year battle with advanced leukemia. He had been at Ketchum since 2003. He had previous stints at Burson Marsteller. He knew CEO Rob Flaherty for a long time. They went to the same college. Just sad news. I think a lot of people knew Marv as a real media relations guy, and just sad news.
Yeah, our thoughts with the respective families.
Yes, very much
sad
so.
passing. Let's talk about Sir Martin Sorrell. He's finally gone on Twitter, Frank. He's made good on a promise he made at Demexco, which is a big tech show in Germany, isn't it?
Which I've been calling
DMXco,
which would be a conference.
No, that's a cycling show.
No, or a conference for washed-up rappers. But either way. So, anyway, Sir Martin, he joined Twitter back in 2009, but he has made his first tweet this week.
Right.
And it was a selfie with Jack Dorsey, and it was a bit of an homage to Jack Dorsey's, to the first tweet that ever went out on Twitter. So, kind of a critical Q&A he did with Dorsey at the conference. And I think Dorsey acknowledged that Twitter hasn't always been the best experience for advertisers and marketers. So, interesting to see.
Yeah, I think he said the WPP spends about $250 million with Twitter, whereas it's something like $5 billion with Facebook.
And even much more than that with Google.
Yeah.
So it really shadows in comparison.
Yeah, I think
the duopoly, as it's called.
Journalists and maybe communications pros love Twitter,
right.
But it's never managed to have that business model, has it, to break through?
We do all love and watch, and we're on Twitter, right? And it's something we'd all love to see Twitter be even more successful. And they're certainly working at it, right? Yeah. They're not just being complacent, but I think that is all about the digital space changing our world so much, and in wanting to see more channels that can help us reach more audiences. Because so much of it, with fewer reporters around, fewer journalists, going directly to consumers or key stakeholders is key. So let's all hope that Twitter finds a way to go in the other direction.
Well, it's got one very prominent customer,
very much so,
in the White House, who's got into the White House on the back of it. And
that was an interesting part of the Q&A. Sorrell asked him if it's a legitimate estimation that Donald Trump's value to Twitter is about $2 billion. Now, Dorsey didn't take the bait on that, but that's an interesting number, and you would think that somebody like Sorrell would have researched that before he said it, so that it's based in something. He didn't just pull it out of the air. So that's an interesting tidbit from that interview.
The other sort of story swirling around WPP and all the holding companies, frankly, is that they're having a bit of an identity crisis. Clients such as yourself, Bill, are asking to maybe see fewer agencies. Because everything's converging. The holding companies have kind of mushroomed and they've bought a lot of agencies. How many agencies has WPP bought? Something like 100 agencies it's bought this year, or entities. It's bought some stakes in media companies too. And certainly the analysts are looking for him to really rationalise his business down and make it more clear-cut for clients. From a client point of view, obviously Martin Sorrell talks a lot about zero-based budgeting, impacting the agency's business. What are you looking for from your agencies and agency support?
Well, I mean, it comes down to creativity and responsiveness and making sure you have the right team. I mean, for me, then I mentioned I'd worked with a number of agencies over the years. It's always been about the individual people you have on your account. So what I'm most concerned about is that we have a team that really delivers day in and day out and adds business value, right? And you have to track it, you have to monitor it, you have to manage it. I really view an agency team as an extension of my great in-house team, and that it's a partnership. And when that partnership's working, right? You guys know when it works even within PR Week, right? So you want it to work, and for me, it's less about where they might sit. There could be advantages to being part of a company with other peer agencies, and it's much more about the talent and the how right it is for the business. And clearly with with Western Union being, that hasn't happened for a while, for Western Union being in 200 countries, you want a global agency, right? So we were in particular looking at, a small group of truly global agencies to support us. But in the end, for me, it's pretty basic. It comes down to the team and is it all working and leading to where it impacts the business? And that's visible not just to me, but to others within the company.
Got it, yeah. Let's talk quickly about the White House in terms of the communications team.
Right.
It's come up into the news again this week. It's interesting how it's all dialed down a bit, hasn't it? The soap opera, the Sean Spicer soap opera is kind of over. He was on Jimmy Kimmel this week.
But we all miss the mooch, don't we?
Well,
I do. Anyway.
I don't know. I think he certainly was not quite being the man behind the scenes and not being the story. But Hope Hicks and Sarah Sanders certainly are, aren't they? And that they seem to have restored a certain amount of normalcy to the press operation.
Yeah, I think with Sarah Huckabee Sanders, you can really see a lot of experience as an on-camera spokesperson, and that she's much more of the traditional press secretary. I think even you can tell how often she goes to the, I just haven't spoken to the president about that, instead of saying something that's demonstrably false.
Yeah, Spicer tended to get himself in, tie himself in knots a bit.
Which was something he wasn't so good at.
Yeah.
So I think you see more of a traditional press secretary role with her.
It's a feint and move sort of thing,
yeah,
rather than sort of engaging in a.
She has a bit of charm too. Yeah. That whereas Sean was kind of going right at people, loudly.
Yeah, as was famously taken as part of the Melissa McCarthy portrayal of him. But and then Hope Hicks has now got that communications director role permanent.
Right, she is 28 years old, which is astonishing. That somebody that young could be White House communications director. Mike Allen over at Axios a few weeks ago called her the most trusted aide in the White House, which explains her rise and her quick rise so quickly. And she
very much behind the scenes.
And she has really the polar opposite of the previous communications director who I just named, who was not very much behind the scenes and didn't know when to go off the record when calling people up from the New Yorker, but we won't dredge that back up again. So she has been with the Trump campaign since the very beginning. She was a comms aide to Trump's daughter Ivanka before that, and she was at Hiltzik Strategies in the years before that too. So,
yeah, and we got a piece from
we got comment from Matthew Hiltzik, who runs that agency, a few days ago, and had a lot of good things to say about her.
Yeah, Bill, you were a relatively young sort of press aide to a senior politician. Make the case for the youth.
I have a lot of respect for spokespeople and communications directors who live under the spotlight. I did have the good fortune, and I'm so thankful I worked for Los Angeles Mayor Tom Bradley, then worked for U.S. Senator Dianne Feinstein. But when I was, Tom Bradley was the mayor of Los Angeles, and I became his press secretary when I was 25. And that came through some hard work, some great mentors, and proving yourself. And I'll say when I was 25, Los Angeles was going through a civil disturbance. I mean, there was a lot happening in the city that was tough and that we had to navigate very carefully and very authentically. And I'd say I had the confidence of the mayor, I had the confidence of the executive team and the management team, and we could accomplish a great deal on behalf of the city. So youthfulness is not, in my mind, an indication if someone's going to be successful. It comes down to, how are they under pressure, and do they perform, and can they really represent the governmental body that they're speaking on behalf. And ultimately you have to have that connection, you have to have that support at the top.
Yeah, absolutely.
And from what you're saying there, I mean, Spicer never quite seemed to have that trust, at least from the reports out of the White House, did he?
Yeah, that's where I watched it like everyone else.
Yeah.
I don't know Sean, I don't know Hope. I think there's probably a lot behind the scenes that might have been true at the time. We'll let him speak to that as he carries
Sure.
forward on his media tour. But I'd say reporters know pretty quickly, and I remember when I was young and met a lot of LA Times reporters who were like, who is this guy, right? I was sort of had risen through the ranks, and I was tested, right? Tested, was I knowledgeable? Did I have the mayor's ear? Could I produce the mayor? Could I produce whomever within the city government? And then during a crisis, it becomes very clear, right? During this civil disturbance, when I'm doing radio interviews about what the Bush administration had just done, it was pretty clear I knew my stuff. So it's and I'll leave others who are perhaps closer to it to judge exactly what was going on.
Yeah, so you made your bones, and then from then you've got a relationship and trust and credibility, and you have ups and downs,
Yeah,
of course.
and I was in politics for 12 years, 7 years with Feinstein, 5 with Bradley, and they are very loyal groups, right? So when you become that sort of family, which can be the same at companies too. I've been very fortunate at many of the companies and to have that feeling, then you really get through thick and thin, and you want to have that sort of loyalty become part of the day-to-day.
Yeah, good stuff, and fascinating to get those insights,
Yes.
Bill, from your
Thank
career.
you.
Talking of great PR professionals, we have announced our honorees for this year's Hall of Fame this week, and it's a really tremendous group of people. We're going to be celebrating them in New York City on December the 4th, Monday, December the 4th. I think it's the 4th, the first Monday in December anyway, 3rd or 4th. And we're honouring this year, we're honouring Howard Rubinstein, who's the sort of doyen of New York media. Muriel Fox, fantastic person and campaigner who founded the National Organization for Women and used to work at Carl Bayer Associates as well. Really a real sort of campaigner for equal rights, and did some fantastic things at a time when business was very different in the 40s, 50s and 60s. Pam Edstrom, who we will honour posthumously, from Wagner Edstrom. Xenia Muka at Disney, and Kim Hunter, another LA-based pro. Yeah, we've got a bit of a West Coast theme on here, I've only just noticed. And Bill Heyman, so someone you know very well.
Yes, no, a good group. I mean, I happen to know Bill especially well, a great sort of mentor over the years to all of us in this profession. But a list that, while I may not have known the rest of them personally, a very admirable list.
Yeah.
So well done.
No, it's going to be a great celebration, actually. It's a really nice night because it's not like an award ceremony where everyone's a bit competitive.
Yeah.
Everyone there is just there to celebrate the profession and the people in it. So it's a fantastic night, and do try and join us as we actually go into our 20th anniversary, PR Week US.
Congratulations.
In 2018. So we're going to make that in December as kind of the kickoff of that anniversary celebrations. Bill, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thanks for joining us on the podcast. Frank, always a pleasure to hang out and hear your wisdom. And that's all we got time for. We'll see you next time on the PR Week.